The day he mocked the hammer my dead father left me, I stayed quiet. 3 days later, that same man was on his knees in a half-finished leasing office, staring at his own tools pinned so cleanly to the floor he could not touch them without an audience. And by then, everyone on that site finally understood what my silence usually meant. My name is Greer. I am 33, and I build things for a living. Most of my adult life has been measured in splinters, chalk lines, bad coffee, and the private math a woman learns when she's the only female on a loud job site before sunrise. You learn what to ignore, what to remember, and what to answer later, when the answer will cost the right person more. At the time, I was framing a luxury townhouse project outside Nashville, the kind with fake farmhouse lights in the model units and sales language about craftsmanship written by people who had never carried wet lumber up a stairwell. Our crew moved fast. The schedule was brutal. Small cruelty disappeared easily inside normal construction chaos. I had been on that site about 2 weeks when Lennox transferred in from another crew. He was loud, sharp-eyed, and just insecure enough to be mean for sport. The first morning he saw me, he looked at my bags, my cut list, then at my face and said, "You actually frame, or are you here for office photos?" A couple of guys laughed because men laugh first when they are checking which way the wind is blowing. I smiled and said, "Hand me that header and find out." He did. I set my side clean and kept moving. That should have ended it. With decent men, competence buys peace. With men like Lennox, it just changes the game. By the end of that week, he had a pattern. If I staged material, he shifted it and called it helping. If I marked an area for my punch work, he wandered through it and left scraps behind. If I left my square beside me and turned away, it would reappear under somebody else's extension cord. Nothing big enough to report without sounding delicate. Just enough disrespect to make me either explode or look weak. I did neither. What I did was watch. He never touched the foreman's gear, never messed with the old guy's setups. His courage was selective. He only pushed people he thought were expected to swallow it. One afternoon, I built a clean-cut station in an empty unit, then ran downstairs for hardware. When I came back up, my sawhorses were gone. I found them in the next room, muddy, while Lennox was using them to sort his own material. I said, "Those were set for my station." He did not even turn around, then said another one. I looked past him and saw an electrician suddenly become fascinated by his wire spool. I said, "There are empty horses in the next unit." That got Lennox to face me. He gave me that smug look some men save for women they think should be grateful to be tolerated. "There are legs on you too. Go get those." The room went still in that ugly, familiar way. Not loud enough to be a scene, just enough for everyone nearby to hear what was really being offered. Take it and teach them the price of disrespect is nothing. Push back and now you are emotional. So I nodded once. Sure. Then I picked up my saw, my square, my cut sheets, and moved to the next unit like I had better things to do than argue with an underdeveloped ego in a nail apron. That bothered him more than shouting would have. The next few days got worse. Someone poured out my coffee. My gloves disappeared and later turned up stuffed behind insulation. Then the real insult landed. I kept a small rolling cart for hardware. Bits, blades, shims, anchor plates, markers, and all the tiny things that save time when everybody else is already behind. It was mine, not company issued. Bought piece by piece because waiting for somebody else to solve your daily problems is how jobs run late. One afternoon I came back from the material trailer and found the drawers dumped into a bathtub. Screws, blades, pencils, hanger nails, all mixed with sawdust and sunflower seed shells. My cart was missing a wheel and leaning crooked against the wall. No one said a word. I looked around that hallway full of grown men suddenly interested in plywood seams, and not one of them met my eyes. That was when I understood this had crossed out of job site joking and into targeted humiliation, and the crowd was going to protect itself by pretending not to know where the line was. I crouched beside the tub and started sorting my things back into piles. My heartbeat went slow. Not hot slow. Sometimes anger makes you loud. Sometimes it makes you exact. That night, I sat in my truck with both hands on the wheel longer than usual. My father's hammer bumped lightly against the seat when I shifted. He had given it to me the year I decided to build for a living. He said, "If you're going to do this, do it like you belong there." He died 2 winters later. I kept the hammer polished, the grip retaped, and my temper cleaner than most people deserved. At home, my younger sister called while I was heating soup. She works in family court and has the kind of voice that hears damage before it shows. She asked, "What happened?" I said, "What makes you think something happened? Because you only go quiet like this when you're deciding whether to be nice or unforgettable." I laughed, but not much. Then I told her enough to make her hiss through her teeth. She said, "Document everything, and do not touch that man." I know. Greer? I know. The next morning, I got to site early and found our assistant super, Claire, reviewing delivery slips on her truck hood. Claire was one of those women who had survived enough bad men to stop wasting words on them. I asked, "Did anyone report messing with personal gear in Building C?" Her eyes lifted to mine. "No, why?" I kept my tone flat. "Because if whoever did it touches my tools again, I'm not taking it to the crew." That got her full attention. She closed the clipboard. "Bring it to me anyway." I watched her a second. "Would it matter?" Her mouth went flat. "Depends how much proof you give me." I had expected dismissal. Instead, I got a small door, but it was open, so I started building a record. Nothing dramatic, just photos, times, notes, who was nearby, what moved, what vanished, what got accidentally disturbed. I texted everything to myself and to my sister, because truth survives better when it has a trail. Then I waited. The opening came on a Friday. We were behind on the front row of units because rain had blown through midweek, and the developer was bringing buyers the next morning. That meant panic. Everybody was told to clean paths, hide scrap, and make unfinished buildings look almost civilized. Around lunch, I was sent to help clear the model unit. Staging furniture was already delivered and wrapped in plastic in the great room. Rugs rolled, lamps boxed, fake lemons in a decorative bowl sitting on the kitchen island, like a warning from another species. When I came back for my impact driver, it was gone. I looked up, already knowing. Lennox was in the dining area, using it to drive screws into temporary bracing he had not even been assigned. He saw me see it, smiled, kept working. I walked over and held out my hand. That's mine. He drove one more screw just to make me wait. Then he turned and said, "You women always make everything about ownership." I could feel people listening without looking. I said, "Give me my drill." He passed it over handle first like he was doing me a favor. "Relax. It's not like you were using it right this second." I checked the bit. He had chewed the tip I had changed that morning. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "If you don't want your stuff touched, don't leave it where men are working." For 1 second, I felt how tired I really was. Not weak, just finished with the idea that staying professional would eventually teach the right lesson. Then I smiled. It startled him. "Good," I said softly. "You're right." And I walked away. That afternoon, Claire kept a few of us late for one final cleanup pass before the weekend walk through. By then, the sky outside had gone the color of old steel in the temp lights. We're throwing long shadows through the leasing office shell. I was carrying scrap trim down the corridor when I saw Lennox's tool rig hanging from the inside handle of a storage room. Not a simple pouch, a heavy custom leather setup with suspenders, polished clips, extra loops, and his name burned into the back panel. The kind of rig men baby and complain about for months. I stopped walking. From outside, I could hear laughter. Boots on gravel, the metal slam of the dumpster gate. I stepped into the room and pushed the door halfway closed. The subfloor was bare. A bucket of mixed fasteners sat by the wall. Beside it was an open box of long lags left from temporary bracing. My nailer was outside on my cart. My impact was in my bag. The leather rig hung at perfect waist height, full of tape, square, knife, pencils, cat's paw, bits. All the little pieces of pride he wore around like a personality. I touched one of the empty belt holes and looked down at the floor. There are moments when your whole body goes still, because some quiet part of you has finally found the exact shape of its answer. Not rage, geometry. Then I heard boots coming back down the hall. I stepped out of the room just as Claire rounded the corner. She said, "You still counting those trim bundles for tomorrow?" I nodded like that was all I had on my mind. In a minute, by the time the building emptied and the radios went dead, I had my timing, my tools, and the first clean breath I had taken all week. Went back in through the side door after the last truck pulled out, and the site settled into that strange evening silence unfinished. Buildings have when every sound feels borrowed. My boots barely made noise on the swept path. The leasing office shell smelled like dust, cold lumber, and fresh joint compound from the drywall crew that had been in earlier that afternoon. I carried my nailer in one hand, my impact in the other, and I did not feel angry anymore. Angry is messy. This was cleaner than that. Lennox's rig was still hanging exactly where he had left it, heavy and smug-looking even without him in it. I set it down flat on the subfloor, spread the leather so it would not crease, and chose my spots carefully. Through existing holes only, through the hammer loop ringlets, through the suspender slots. Nothing torn, nothing punctured, just fixed so securely to the floor that removing it would take time, patience, and an audience. The first slag bit down with a hard, satisfying bite into the wood, then another, then another. I used different lengths on purpose, sinking them in at slightly different angles where the hardware already opened the leather enough to pass through clean. I drove nails through the metal loops too and bent them over tight with the claw of my father's hammer so they could not just be yanked free. It was methodical work, precise, almost peaceful. When I finished, the rig looked almost normal until you tried to lift it. I stood, wiped my hands on my pants, and stared at it for a long second. Then I picked up my nailer, switched off the temp light in the storage room, and left. I did not sleep much that night, but not because I regretted it. I kept thinking about the way he had said, "If you do not want your stuff touched, do not leave it where men are working." That sentence kept scraping against the inside of my skull like a bad blade. By dawn, regret still had not arrived. Saturday morning, buyers were due to tour the model units before lunch, which meant the site started twitching before sunrise. Sales staff in clean boots, the developer's reps smiling too hard, the super barking about mud on the porch covers. I was helping reset trim in a hallway off the leasing office when the shout came. Not a hurt shout, a furious one. Heads turned all over the building. I kept measuring my board. Then came a second shout, louder this time. "Which one of you idiots touched my rig?" Now there were footsteps, laughter being swallowed, men pretending to work while moving toward the sound. I waited just long enough not to look eager, then set down my tape and followed the traffic. Lennox was inside the storage room, bent over his tool rig with both hands wrapped around the belt. His face was red. He had already tried brute force. I could tell from the way the leather strained and snapped back flat. One of the laborers stood in the doorway, biting his lip so hard I thought he might split it. Lennox straightened and saw us gathering. "This isn't funny." Nobody answered. He pointed at the floor. "Who did this?" Still no answer. Then he crouched again and tried to back out one of the lags with a flathead from his pocket knife. It slipped. Somebody behind me made a choking noise that might have been a cough if you were very generous. And that was the moment I had seen in my head. The moment from the first line of the story my own body had been telling itself all week. A man who thought embarrassment was a tool he could hand to me whenever he wanted, now kneeling in front of everyone, unable to free his own gear without exposing how small his little campaign had really been. Claire stepped into the doorway beside me. Why is there a crowd? Lennox shot to his feet. Somebody vandalized my bags. Claire's eyes moved from him to the floor, then to the rig, then back to him. Vandalized? It's screwed into the subfloor. She folded her arms. Did it damage the leather? He opened his mouth, closed it. That's not the point. Her voice stayed flat. It is if you're accusing someone of damaging property. He crouched again and yanked the rig hard to demonstrate the problem. It did not move. A few of the guys finally lost the battle and laughed out loud. Quick, sharp bursts they tried to hide inside coughs. Lennox turned toward them, wild-eyed. Real funny. Which one of you did it? I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and said nothing. Claire said, get it up before the buyers come through. With what? She looked at him for a beat too long. With tools, Lennox, since you seem to have plenty. That earned a real laugh, open and impossible to take back. His gaze landed on me then. It stayed there half a second longer than chance. Maybe because I was not laughing. Maybe because I was too calm. But suspicion is not proof. And men like him are used to intimidation working better than evidence. He looked away first. He ended up borrowing an impact from another framer and spending the next 20 minutes on his knees backing each screw out one by one while the hallway kept filling and emptying with people who suddenly had reasons to pass by. Nobody stopped him. Nobody helped. That was the social shift right there. Quiet as dust. All week he had counted on the crowd to protect him. Now the crowd had decided the joke was on him, and they were just curious enough to watch. I went back to work. Around mid-morning, Claire found me outside by the porch columns where I was resetting a crooked return. She stood close enough that nobody else could hear and said, I'm going to ask you one time. I kept my eyes on the trim, then asked carefully. Her mouth twitched. Was that you? I sighted the line, tapped the piece flush, and fired 2 nails. Did he file a complaint? No. Did he report property damage? No. Then I guess we both have a peaceful Saturday. For a second, I thought she might push. Instead, she nodded once and said very quietly, next time, bring me the first move before you make the second one. That told me more than any speech could have. By Monday, the whole site knew. Not officially. Construction has its own newspapers. Somebody sees something, somebody repeats it at the gang box, and by lunch, everybody knows. The shape of a story even. If no one knows the name attached to it, the version moving around by noon was that Lennox had gotten too comfortable messing with the wrong person and ended up doing free yoga in a storage room to get his tools back. He started keeping his distance after that, but men like that rarely stop cleanly. They just change weapons. The next hit came through reputation. At our weekly coordination meeting with the super, the assistant super, trade foreman, and a couple of office people standing around a folding table covered in prints, Lennox made a point of saying progress in our row had been slowed because certain people were too territorial about shared tools and couldn't handle normal site culture. He did not say my name, but he looked right at Claire after saying it, like he was feeding her a professional version of the story. Something cleaner, something that would make me sound difficult instead of targeted. My stomach went cold, not hot. Work reputation is the front that lasts. One sentence in the wrong ear, and suddenly every mistake you never made starts sticking to your name. Claire said, who specifically? Lennox shrugged. Just saying morale gets weird when people take pranks personal. The room went quiet. Then one of the electricians, a man named Archer, who had seen more than he ever said, leaned back against a stack of drywall and spoke without looking at me. Pranks usually go both ways, Lennox said. Meaning what? Archer finally looked up. Meaning you dumped a hardware cart into a tub and took somebody's drill right out of their station on Friday. That kind of thing? Lennox froze. I did too, but only inside. Claire turned slowly toward him. Did you? He laughed too fast. Everybody borrows stuff. Archer said, borrowing is when you ask. A painter near the door added, saw the cart too. Another voice from the back. Coffee thing was him, then another. And the sawhorses. It was like watching a dam crack. Not because they had suddenly grown brave. Because once one person spoke, the cost of staying silent changed sides. Lennox looked around the room as if betrayal was a fresh invention. Claire's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. Walk with me? He started talking the moment she turned away. Quick and defensive, but nobody listened. They crossed the slab and disappeared around the corner toward the job trailer. I stood there with my hands curled around the edge of the print table, trying not to let relief show on my face. My chest felt tight, almost painful. Not because I had won anything yet, because for the first time since he arrived, the truth had left my body and entered the room without me having to beg for it. That afternoon, he was pulled from our building and sent to exterior blocking with a different crew. The following day, he tried one last move. I found out because my phone buzzed while I was cutting backing plates. It was my sister, sending me a screenshot from a local neighborhood page. One of the buyer agents had posted cheerful photos from the weekend walkthrough, and in the background of one shot, blurred but recognizable, was Lennox kneeling in the storage room over his tool rig, while 3 men stood watching. No faces clear enough for trouble, no context written, just a funny behind-the-scenes job site image people were already joking about in the comments. Below it, from an account with no real name and a fresh profile picture, was a comment that read, "Some women on this site should worry more about doing their jobs than acting crazy." I stared at it for a long moment, then I zoomed in. The burner account had been careless. Same truck in the profile banner. Same dog from a picture he had once shown at lunch. Same stupidity, dressed differently. This time I did not stay silent. I screenshotted the post post, the comment, the account, and sent everything to Claire with one line. "You asked for first move next time." She called me less than a minute later. "Do not respond online." I wasn't going to. "Good. Come to the trailer at lunch." At lunch, Claire was waiting with the super and an office admin from the developer's side. Lennox was already there, sitting too straight in a folding chair, his jaw working hard enough to hear. Claire slid printed screenshots across the desk. "Want to explain why a public post connected to our open houses includes a comment implying a worker on my site is unstable?" He glanced at the papers and made the mistake of smirking. "Could be anybody." The office admin said, "It links to your phone number in the profile recovery field." We checked. That wiped the smirk clean off. Then Claire put my photo log on the desk. Dates, times, pictures of moved gear, dumped hardware, missing tools recovered in his work zone, and notes on who was nearby. She had printed those too. I had not even realized she still had all the texts I forwarded after that first conversation. Lennox looked from the stack to me and understood finally that what I had been building was never a tantrum. It was a wall. He said, "So this is what this is? She can do what she did to my tools, but I'm the problem?" Claire did not blink. "Did you report damage?" He said nothing. "Did you report theft?" Nothing. "Did you repeatedly target a coworker, then try to smear her when people stopped laughing with you?" His mouth opened, closed. The super leaned back in his chair and said, almost bored, "We can end this easy or hard." Lennox looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe hoping I would save him with softness. Maybe hoping I would crack and give him the dramatic fight he could use to repaint the story. I just met his eyes and said, "You should have left my station alone." He was escorted off-site before the day ended. Officially, it was for conduct, harassment, and creating unnecessary liability during a live sales weekend. Unofficially, it was because bullies only work while everyone else agrees to be furniture. The quiet afterward was strange. Good, but strange. A few guys apologized in the sideways. Embarrassed language men use when the real sentence is, "I saw more than I admitted." Archer handed back my tape one afternoon and said, "Should have spoken sooner." I told him, "You did when it counted." That seemed to hit him harder than blame would have. Claire never asked me again if I had nailed Lennox's rig to the floor. She did, however, start shutting down smaller nonsense faster. A joke here, a shove there, a borrowed tool that suddenly got returned with an actual apology attached. Standards spread when somebody finally proves they are not imaginary. Months later, after that project wrapped, I heard Lennox had bounced through 2 more crews and lasted about as long as warm ice. Turns out men who build their confidence out of picking weak targets usually collapse the minute the target list dries up. I still carry my father's hammer. The grip is newer now, the face worn bright, the balance as familiar as my own hand. Sometimes I catch younger women on site watching me, the way I used to watch the older tradeswomen I met once in a blue moon, trying to figure out how they move through all this noise without letting it rot them from the inside. I do not tell them to be nice. I do not tell them to be hard either. I tell them to be exact. Keep records. Protect your name. Make your silence expensive for the right people. And every now and then, when somebody starts mistaking composure for helplessness, I remember a half-finished leasing office, a smug man on his knees, and a floor that held the truth in place long enough for everybody else to see it.